Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
How you doing?
I'm doing okay. I was driving last night and I learned something that you'll undoubtedly applaud, which is Frank Gaffney has its own radio network now.
What's good for Frank Gaffney is good for America.
The Secure Freedom Network. It's actually only a show where he interviews people who oppose the Iran nuclear deal. He had a very articulate one on last night named Wormser. I'm sure you know him.
Yeah, he's a famous neocon of long standing.
Yeah. His complaint is we've already started to cave we allege that they would have to go first, but in fact we've freed up a bunch of money for them from North Korea, so they're getting a huge influx of funds, and we've said they have to stop enriching uranium, but we're not making them go back and give up the uranium that they've already enriched.
Now, this is Gaffney saying it or Wormser?
This is Wormser saying it. I believe
he's probably a more credible source than Gaffney, who is flat out, I don't want to use the word crazy. What's a good synonym that you can't get sued for? Let's just go with crazy.
Passionate.
He's passionate.
They also said that they're gearing these negotiations for the June or whatever the elections are in Iran, and that they're negotiating with a timer, a gun pointed to their head, and that this is stupid since Khamenei will run everything anyway.
These guys are so nuts. It's true that there's an election in June, and it's true that it may be harder to get a deal then there just may be various kinds of complications that could ensue. So it's in both of our interests to get it done. I'm not that up on the domestic politics, but as just kind of a generic principle, getting the deal done might make moderates more likely to prevail in the elections. Although I don't really know who's running. But there was good news on that front today. I mean, they consider bad news. I consider good news.
Right.
Did you hear this today from them?
Last night.
Last night. Okay, it was kind of starting to be broken last night, the news that the U.S. and Iran basically are going to start negotiating through intermediaries, not exactly face-to-face, but all the parties who signed on to the original deal are going to be there, and that starts next week, and it's starting to look like something may actually happen. Meanwhile, there has been one fruit of the policy that people like Gaffney and Wormser favored that they will surely disapprove of and surely not acknowledge that it's a policy, that it's a fruit of their own worldview. But, China and Iran signed a big 25-year deal last week. China's going to get Iran's oil. Iran's going to get a lot of investment and money from China. And, we basically have spent the last 3 years in doing something that surely Wormser and Gaffney applauded, making it very, very hard for Iran to export oil. So naturally, they're going to turn to China. And now, of course, these same guys are freaking out about the China-Iran axis. In fact, there's a guy named Matthew Kronig who's more or less he's not as crazy as Gaffney, but he's very anti-Iran. I mean, a couple of the pieces that he's written for foreign policy, one of them is called Time to Attack Iran. That was 2012. In 2014, he wrote a piece for foreign policy called Still Time to Attack Iran. I'm not kidding. This is not a joke. And he tweets after the China-Iran deal, new axis of evil. And,
I was just going to suggest that.
Yeah, well, it's excellent. Excellent branding, but it's a creation. I don't know. I think China and Iran have been talking about this for more than 3 years, and the most oppressive policies have been over the last 3 years since Trump backed out of the deal. On the other hand, it's been clear ever since Trump took office that they couldn't count on the deal lasting.
What's so terrible about Iran selling oil to China?
It doesn't bother me.
Okay.
But the people it bothers, I'm saying, are the very people who pushed Iran in this direction.
Well, right, but But one should always judge by what's actually happening, not by who gets pissed off.
No, I'm just pointing to this is how muddled these guys are. They favor policies that lead to the outcomes they disapprove of. What? That's not a sign of coherence.
I thought this meant that you should get your radio network, Bob.
I thought this was our radio network.
That's a good point, but it doesn't come through my car radio. Actually, it did accidentally last night, but it'll never happen again. I saw for some reason my phone recorded it as a podcast, so all of a sudden the parrot was talking. It was very scary.
That's scary.
But they also claim that Israel would attack, was getting close to attacking Iran, but there's some Biden intelligence official who they claim is very hostile to Israel. And I wrote his name on my arm, and then I washed my arm. So it was some name like Bitker, began with a B.
It doesn't ring a bell. Anyway, there used to be a fair number of people in the intelligence bureaucracy who are critical of Iran. I think that's not as true as of Israel. I think that's not as true as it used to be.
But this is a Biden guy. They claim Biden is
an actual
hostile to
Biden
Israel.
Appointee. He's a political appointee.
He's in the White House. Yeah, he's a White House guy, not a CIA guy.
Well, the head of the I see, White House intelligence guy. I don't know. I'd be happy to meet him.
They claim that we're gonna leak the Israeli plan, just that they're going to attack and thwart it that way.
Well, a guy like Wormser would be more plugged into what's going on in Israel than I am. So who knows? I mean, Israel has a history of kind of saying they're going to attack Iran and not doing it. I mean, the funny thing is the most famous example of this is when, I don't know, 10 years ago or something, they fed this stuff to Jeffrey Goldberg, who wrote a cover story for The Atlantic predicting Israel would attack Iran within a year. It was pretty clear that they'd rather that Obama himself, do something about Iran's nuclear program. So he did. He did this deal that shuts it down, and Israel didn't like that. I think they were hoping for more dramatic action. But there's it's always hard to say with these things whether it's some kind of bluff or what.
But so the Goldberg article wasn't necessarily wrong.
Well, he actually said there was a greater than 50% chance. That's not strictly speaking wrong when it doesn't happen, because you didn't say there was a 100% chance, but it was more wrong than right.
Right. We'll put that in our Jeffrey Goldberg file.
I'm not sure there's room in my Jeffrey Goldberg file for more material, so could you handle that one?
I may need a job someday, Bob.
Well, if we make good use of the file, maybe you won't have to worry about him being the editor of The Atlantic at that point.
I don't know. I don't think I have much of a future.
I should say we're not talking about any actual dirt or inside information. We're talking about his public record.
No, that he was wrong about the weapons of mass destruction before the Iraq War, mainly.
This is not like a Matt Gaetz type thing. Although, if I had that kind of material, but I digress. This is not a Matt Gaetz type thing.
By the way, I haven't had my cup of coffee.
Yeah, I
was unable to get it, so I may sort of grind down into like a
you can't finish the sentence.
An inert state by the end of this hour. So
did you think about doubling up on the Sudafed?
End it gracefully. I did. No, I hadn't. I could do that, but I think that causes heart problems. So probably not. Much as I love this podcast. Did
you have any Sudafed at all, Mickey?
I did have a Sudafed, yes.
Oh, that's reassuring.
Matt Gaetz, I got shit for writing a tweet saying that I thought Matt Gaetz and Eric Swalwell were basically the same person, and I claim vindication because they both got in trouble by screwing around.
But with Gaetz, it was good old fashioned, American sex. He wasn't
I always assumed he was gay.
Well, there was the strange story of Nestor, the I guess guy from Cuba that Gaetz suddenly disclosed had been kind of like a son to him since age 12. But when I saw more of that stuff about that in the course of assimilating the latest Matt Gaetz scandal, it seemed to me that maybe it's true that he was more like a son to him. I don't know. There was one picture of Gaetz in a Santa Claus outfit, kind of not snuggling with him, but doing something Santa Clauses don't normally do with 13-year-olds.
He just uses too much hair gel. But
Matt Gaetz?
Yeah, but that's what the kids these days do, I guess.
I suppose. Can you explain? This thing seems so weird.
Anyway, I was wrong. Obviously, I was wrong. Go ahead.
About what? Hair gel?
About all the stereotypical traits that Matt Gaetz had that led me to think he was probably gay.
Well, he could be all things to all people. Who knows?
But my gaydar is not what it used to be.
Your gaydar was always prone to false positives, I would say. I won't name names, but there are some people I think you were wrong about. But explain this Gaetz thing to me. It's so weird because...
I'm not up on it.
Well, here's the deal. So Gaetz, you hear this thing, investigation by the Justice Department of Gaetz for having sex with a 17-year-old and maybe paying her, or maybe doing both. I don't know if it's sure. So he goes on Tucker Carlson and says the real story here is an ex-Justice Department official tried to extort $25 million out of me, or else he would, spill beans that are not valid beans about this 17-year-old thing.
Did he name the official?
Yeah, he did. He's a guy named, I think, is it Greer? He named the guy. The guy's a real guy. He's now responded in the press. But it only gets weirder because his story is that this guy and another guy, I don't know which of the two, supposedly approached Gaetz's father first. Gaetz's father was a prominent Florida politician. I didn't know that.
I didn't know that. He
was head of the state senate or something. And supposedly these guys, there's an Iran link here. It's so weird. So these guys wanted to get free some American from Iran, even though by most accounts this guy's dead. Okay. But for some reason, they approached Gaetz's father about this, and I think they want money to help it happen or something. Why would you do this? But anyway, supposedly one of them says, and we could help out with your son's legal jeopardy in the Justice Department if you play ball. And one of the guys, not this Greer guy, the Justice Department official, but another a guy who knew him, has been quoted in the New York Times now as saying, well, I just threw that out as kind of a sweetener. Well, wait, if you threw it out at all, that's kind of weird. Now, this isn't the ex-Justice Department official who's throwing it out, but I just have two questions. I mean, A, if you were going to just extort money from him over this legal case, why would you mention Iran? And B, if you were interested in the Iran thing, why would you approach Matt Gaetz or his father about anything? It just doesn't make sense. Just doesn't make sense. And, I mean, clearly Gaetz is using it as this big, diversionary thing, because the subsequent reporting has made it pretty clear that Gaetz is under investigation. There's another political guy he's attached to who is apparently just knee-deep in prostitutes. And there's evidence that Gaetz was, kind of along for the ride. I don't know. And Gaetz himself has as good as admitted that there are women he was involved with whom he paid for their hotel rooms, their flights, and so on. But he's saying it was all above board. He just treats women generously and so on. That's about all I know. It's pretty weird.
Was the name Chuck Johnson mentioned in any of these contexts?
No. Is he that? He's not that crazy.
He's the redhead guy.
Yeah, he is crazy.
There are two Charles Johnsons. There's a left-wing one and a right-wing one.
Well, one of them went from right to left, right?
Right.
And
left to right. I think left to right to left.
Okay, but anyway, Chuck Johnson is not that guy.
No, Chuck Johnson is the guy who was instrumental in exposing the Menendez scandal, and he's done some good work. But he's the guy that Gates brought onto the floor of the House, I believe.
Man, I wish he had nailed Menendez. Menendez,
one of the big. We agree on that. One of the big speeches. So he has a known Gates connection, and he's always doing things behind the scenes that one doesn't see in public. But anyway,
let me just quickly bring Iran in one more time. One possible reason that Biden is more willing to play ball with Iran now is there had been reports that Menendez, head of the Foreign Relations Committee, I guess, and Chuck Schumer were holding the COVID relief bill hostage on Iran. And Biden was afraid to make a move toward Iran because they were putting the screws on him. But I don't know.
You mean until they passed it, and now they passed it. So.
Yeah, of course, it raised the question, why aren't they saying the same thing about the infrastructure bill? Maybe they are, but we don't know.
They may be. So do you retract your critique of Anthony Blinken as...
it's weird.
Worse than Hitler or whatever you said about him?
It's weird. There's this new publication, The Signal, and it's run by John Gould, who was editor of the New Republic before. Oh, New Republic we haven't talked about this, has yet another editor.
I think we did.
Did we talk about? Oh, yeah, we talked about Tomasky last week. Okay, so anyway, the guy before Chris Lemon was John Gould, who had been kind of in some ways the de facto online editor of The Atlantic. He started this thing called The Signal.
He wasn't the guy before Frank Foer?
He was after Frank. He was after it changed hands. It was after Chris Hughes sold it. He was maybe the second. There's been like 4 editors since Chris Hughes sold it.
Who was the guy? I thought Gabriel Snyder was.
Gabriel Snyder was the first. John Gould was after him. Chris Lehman, Michael, and they're getting to either you or me. Don't worry, our day is coming because they're getting older. Tomasky's only a couple years younger than me. They're moving in our direction.
They're moving age-wise, but not ideology-wise. Whoever was the editor before Frank Foer was very highly respected within the New Republic. I don't know who that was.
Wait, before Frank Foer? This is ancient days. So that's like after Andrew and after... God, I'm blanking.
After everybody.
Well, Peter Beinart was before Frank, right?
Right, so between Beinart and Foer. Anyway.
There's been a lot of editors in the Republic.
If I have a better memory than you, we're both in big trouble.
Let me just close that loop. So Signal interviewed me yesterday on foreign policy. They had heard me railing about the blob or something. And I just had my coffee. I was really in railing mode. So I think it probably came off as crazy to begin with. But then, wouldn't you know it, I was complaining about the Iran thing. And then this Iran development today, like after I do the interview and like an hour before they post the interview. So now I sound like I'm crazier than I should be in light of the progress, reported progress on Iran.
It works for radio. The Apocalypse Aversion Network. What could be more exciting? So I think that Biden is also waiting for this on the infrastructure bill for this parliamentarian ruling. Are you familiar with that?
You mean no, I'm not.
In other words, the Democrats could pass a whole bunch of stuff through this reconciliation process, but in theory they could only do it 2 times a year. And Chuck Schumer has found some fine print that he thinks will let him do it 3 times a year, okay? And the parliamentarian was supposed to rule on that today, but there was this attack at the Capitol, which I haven't followed. A police officer was killed.
Yeah, by a guy in a car. Apparently it was purposeful.
Was it a deplorable, or was it...
my guess in light of recent events would be that, but I have no idea. He jumped out of the car with a knife after mowing the guy down and injuring another cop.
Depends what kind of car.
Well, I think there's I'll go online and look for a picture of the car, and then you can tell us. It looks hard to say. It's but anyway.
You can't even tell what kind of car?
Well, the trunk is popped open. That makes it hard.
Send me the link. Send me the link. I'm good at identifying cars. I was once mugged, and I identified the car for police as a Ford pickup, and the police were not impressed, noting perhaps that 1.5 million Ford pickups are sold in the United States every year.
Many people wouldn't have known it was a Ford, Mickey. Most Americans would not have known that it's a Ford.
They want the license plate, it turns out. Who knew? So anyway, if there are only 2 reconciliations, then there's this mystery of Biden dividing the infrastructure bill into 2 parts. The first part having the real infrastructure part, which is still only a minority of it, but it has, global warming stuff and
actual bridges and roads.
And it's called the Jobs Act. And then the second one is the liberal social spending, which has the hated neo-welfare provision, among others.
Hated by one commentator so far, and that would be you.
And not as young. And so if that's the case, why would if there's only 2, right? Mm-hmm. Why would any Republican cooperate and pass it without reconciliation, thereby opening up reconciliation for the second bill? You want to force them to try to pass both through reconciliation and have to throw one in the dumpster. And it looks like a lot of people on the left are worried that the second bill with the hated neo-welfare provision will be the one thrown in the dumpster. I don't quite understand why Biden would do that, and I don't understand why he divided the bill in the first place.
I have a theory.
Okay.
If he at that point thought there could be... maybe this doesn't make sense, but I assume his plan was to pass the first one with Republican help, and then the second one... I mean, he probably figured... I don't know. But was that his plan, do you think? And then the second one you do with Democrats and reconciliation?
I thought that was his plan, and it makes sense if there are only 2 reconciliation bills allowed. If there are 3... but still, why? If it's so if it's so popular, they can put them both in the same bill and pass them both with reconciliation. Who cares about Republicans?
But if the chances are better of getting the first one passed than of getting the whole thing passed, it's like a bird in hand, and then you hope for the best on the second one. And maybe that depends
entirely on, are there Democrats willing to defect? So they need Republican votes. It seems to me, what I hadn't expected is we're approaching a sort of parliamentary system where there are like 2 or 3 big bills a year through reconciliation, and the winning party just puts everything it's got in these 2 or 3 big bills. And I assume that the reason this hasn't happened before is because some congressman would object to one part of the bill and vote against it. But the Democrats don't seem to be doing that. They're negotiating very deftly any problems ahead of time, and they're all voting in lockstep, and it is like a parliamentary system. So if you have that discipline, why not have the discipline on the whole thing? Why split it in 2?
Maybe the second part just has more divisive stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, but only if it's divisive for Democrats. They don't care. Well, I think this whole bipartisan thing is a sham. This is like the biggest. This is a huge kabuki thing where they're pretending to try to get the Republicans on board, and they know the Republicans aren't going to be on board. I'll believe they will really want to get the Republicans on board when they make an actual concession to the Republicans. Mm-hmm. And we haven't seen any of that. But they're not going to do it before the parliamentarian rules. Yeah. Once the parliamentarian rules, that'll be their time to make a concession. But
I got to think it's easier to get Joe Manchin on board for roads and bridges. I got a feeling we're going to have some pretty nice roads and bridges in West Virginia before this is all over. But it's easier to get him on board for that than some of this stuff. Like, especially, is the race-based stuff in the second one?
It's in both of them.
It's in both. I want to talk about that at some point.
The first one has $20 billion to ensure equity in public works projects, which is a good cause. I mean, every black communities around the country were mowed down in the last big wave of public works projects. I didn't realize that in Santa Monica, the freeway I go on every day goes right through the heart of what was a thriving black community.
Is that one of the freeways that's endangered? because of, there are provisions like in New Orleans, there's been this movement in a minority neighborhood to get rid of this segment of IH-10, which originally was foisted on the neighborhood, I guess, via eminent domain. And now they've been, they've been lobbying to get rid of it. And apparently the bill actually makes reference to that and would help them out in getting rid of IH-10, as I understand it, which is...
This is also IH-10, but where it hits the coast.
Well,
and there's just no way that they're going to get rid of that. That is
that's what
main artery of West Los Angeles, and the black community is very small and powerless there. If the larger black community in LA, which is not that powerful to begin with, LA doesn't have its fair share of blacks. If they got behind it, then maybe they'd make some progress. But no, it's what's weird. There was a good article in the LA Times on this. Even in its heyday, the blacks who lived in Santa Monica thought it was unhip and they wanted to live somewhere else.
Yeah.
They didn't know they were living in paradise. Jesus.
Well, when was IH-10 built?
It was built in 1964. The ribbon was cut by Carroll Shelby driving a Ford GT through the ribbon. Fantastic.
Because, I don't know, this is an overly technical point probably, but most of, the people truly victimized by this are gone for the most part. And if they sold their homes to other people, the people who bought the homes bought them at a discount because of the blight. So it's not like they're really victimized. I mean, the people who got screwed are people who might be old enough to still be in the houses, unlikely. And B, if they pass them on to their descendants, they have a legit grievance. But, once the homes have been sold, the house, reflect, you didn't have to move. You moved there to get a discount in light of the blight. That was your call. It's a different argument, right?
Right. I agree. There's still a lot of old homeowners around though.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised. Especially since 64. But the $20 billion, I mean, what are the chances that is not just going to be totally wasted? I would rate the chances.
Wait, the $20 billion is devoted to which part?
To ensuring racial equity in public works infrastructure projects.
But that consists of things like what? Hiring black-owned construction firms?
Try to imagine some. I don't think so. I think the idea is that the impact is on black.
The impact.
It's hard to believe. One can try to imagine how they'd spend $20 billion on councils. It's hard to believe that it's not a total.
Well, I just have a separate concern about just the political impact of things that are stated in racial terms when you could get much the impact you want by designing them in class terms, right? It's like including these neighborhoods, right? Like I'm sure there were some white low-income people who got screwed. Like when Robert Moses built all that stuff in New York, there were certainly low-income white neighborhoods that were adversely impacted. I mean, if you made this about class, all the people you're trying to help with the race-based policy would still be within its scope, but you would be, I think, less likely to get another Donald Trump as president than you will be if you keep stating all of these policies in terms of race.
That's an important point, and I'm not sure you're right. Wouldn't there be some resistance among the Black Lives Matter crowd to stating it in race-neutral terms? I realized this when I think I told you this, when Gavin Newsom announced he was going to appoint a black woman to the court, and I thought that's a terrible signal to send. Why not just appoint a black woman? Don't announce it. And then I realized, no, the equity crowd wants you to announce that you're giving a special favor for race.
Sure. Intra-party politics pull Biden in that direction. I'm just saying that come the general election, the Democrats could pay a price with the very same policies. This is an obvious tension.
You would hope.
Well, you would hope. I wouldn't. But
I thought you wanted them to switch to a class-based system.
I do. But
if they lose an election because of it, then they're likely to give up the old race-based
I can't take another 4 years of a Trump-like figure as president. But let me just a couple of other.
How about a midterm? They can lose a midterm.
There was a headline I saw in the Times today that's related to this. And it's just, there are a couple of things that illustrate how the liberal media is, I mean, I didn't mean to use the term in the way it sounds, but you know what I mean, is kind of reinforcing this drive to kind of like racialize lots of policies. One was there was this finding. The headline in the Times is colleges that serve the working class are hurting in the pandemic. And then the subhead on the front page still is community colleges with many low income Black and Latino students are struggling, and experts and so on. So the story, strictly speaking, is actually about low income areas, but the Times itself is kind of highlighting this part. The other thing was this NPR story today, and this is the first I've heard of an actual reparations policy. Maybe I haven't been paying attention, but the NPR story this morning was about it was Evanston. I didn't catch all of it. It must be Evanston, Illinois. There's some kind of, I don't know if it's a housing policy or what, but the point is it's being stated explicitly as reparations. And so it really is, you know, it's not class-based. It's for I guess, blacks in particular. But the thing was, NPR, like they said, well, the policy has come under fire. And then you hear from some people who want it to involve more in the way of apologizing, and so on. In other words, you only hear the criticism from the left. Right. Now, I believe it's safe to say that you wouldn't have to work very hard to find critics from the right. Now, some might be reluctant to speak up, including some actual people in Evanston, but NPR is already framing the reparations debate as being like how far you want to go, not whether reparations is a smart way to go. And I think, again, politically, it could wind up being bad for everyone, in my view, as opposed to a class-based policy.
NPR is, in the calm of the Biden administration, NPR is revealing itself to be a huge menace. I mean, really, and the worst is the news, because the news sections where like you tune in on the hour and they say, here are the top headlines, okay, and then they'll misstate the Georgia voting rights thing, but it's not. I don't think it's permanently archived anywhere, so you can't go and bust them for it. And it's probably not written by their top guys, so the woke millennials who may be the top guys now, can do their damage, and it's just been NPR has been enraging me.
NPR is pretty bad. I mean, I listen to the BBC podcast in the morning, and the BBC has its flaws, but it is just head and shoulders above NPR as a news operation. We
can get to Georgia later, but the point the point about the $20 billion for equity is the Republicans. If everybody's saying, "Oh, Biden can't be the new FDR because he only has a 51 vote." He only has a 51 vote majority in the Senate, but if he can get away with it, why shouldn't he ram as much through?
Totally.
In 51 votes. That's how we got Kavanaugh. It was just possible. That's how we got Amy Coney Barrett by ramming things through on the tiniest of margins.
Sure.
But the traditional way that would be stopped is if there was a blowback. In other words, if the Republicans were going to get wiped out in the midterms. But the GOP is so incompetent that's really a hollow threat. They're focusing on, they're raising taxes. There's so much government. We're for smaller government. Instead, and those are just loser arguments, especially in the middle of a pandemic. The winner arguments, or the strong argument, would be that it's a chamber of horrors of provisions like this $20 billion or some other provisions that are disasters that are what the Democratic interest groups really care about. Sure, if the roads and bridges part do that, that's only like 5, 10, 15% of the bill. But the Democrats have packed it and go through the list of the horrors, and it's not hard to find them.
I'm sure the Republicans will be complaining about the race-based stuff. They already are, right?
I'm not so sure. And the other thing you do is with the tax increases, you say, this is the money that was supposed to save Social Security. You're spending it now on this chamber of horrors. We're going to need it later to make Social Security solvent. The taxes on the corporate tax rate to rise and the taxes on people over $400,000. We need that money for later. I just think those are both more potent than saying, tax increases impede the economy, blah, blah, blah.
Well, I mean, it does seem to me like the Republicans are kind of playing a pre-Trump era political game in the sense that they are not, they're not being economic populists. I mean, they're letting Biden say, you guys opposed all this COVID relief. Right. You opposed A, B, and C, which will help the working person in America. Right. Now, Biden is, again, complicating his rhetoric by making so much of this explicitly race-based instead of class-based, and that is an opening for the Republicans, and I think they are taking advantage of that already and can be counted on to do that.
The other thing that is in the Chamber of Commerce is, a lot of pro-union provisions that would never pass if they were standing alone. I think they ban in one of the two bills, they ban the right to work laws, and there's the PRO Act, which is the Uber Act that says if alleged independent contractors who drive for Uber have to have the rights of collective bargaining as employees. That isn't so bad, but they applied it to freelance writers, and they said anytime you write more than 2 blog posts a year or something in California, that you suddenly you can't get hired for a third blog post because then you have to be treated as an employee. So there's just a whole grab bag of pro-union stuff there. Anyway, Paul Krugman wrote a column about why the point you raised about why the Republicans aren't populist, and the answer seems obvious. The people that are there now are not changing. They're going to babble about tax cuts because that's all they don't know how to say, and that's what the consultants tell them to say. Yeah. It's what the donors want them to say. And it's like, the most oversighted work in history, Thomas Kuhn's Structure of Scientific Revolutions. The paradigm doesn't shift because the existing congressmen change their minds. Right. The existing congressmen have to either die or be voted out of office, and new congressmen have to come in who have this new paradigm.
Yeah, so I actually think that applies less well to politicians than to scientists whom he was talking about.
Think, but name a Republican politician who has actually gotten religion on populism.
Oh, a lot of people are saying, well, look, on immigration, haven't a number of them kind of backed down? Like, is Marco Rubio the immigration reformer he used to be?
He's backed down. We think, no, he's not, but he's just hiding it.
So you say, but I mean, even that is different from what Kuhn described with scientists.
It's consistent with the fact that he hasn't bought in completely to the new paradigm. Even on immigration, it's hard for me to think of old schoolers who've changed their minds on immigration.
What about Ted Cruz?
He's gotten a little better, as it's been in his interest, but he'll sell out instantly if that then becomes in his interest. Whereas I think the classic example of the new paradigm shifter would be the J.D. Vance, who scares people precisely because he may actually hold these beliefs. And he would represent the. I mean, it takes a more
flattering paradigm. Takes a more flattering view of the character of politicians than I have to think that they would comply with what Kuhn said about scientists. I mean, Kuhn's point was like Einstein didn't accept quantum physics. It's like that's how strong the effect is among scientists. Like, smartest person in the history of the universe just refuses to adjust after a certain age. But
You're rejecting my theory that Einstein wasn't that smart?
Is that part of your theory? Oh, yeah. You claim that Einstein was just applauding. Yeah. We had this discussion in the Parrot Room, didn't we? I maintain that Darwin is a good example of a fundamentally plodding thinker who did something great, whereas Einstein, I believe, was a true genius.
He had Sitzfleisch.
What is that?
We went through this in the Parrot Room. It means you can sit on you have thick sitting flesh so you can just sit until you've solved the problem.
Right. Well, we shouldn't give away premium content. If we said that in the Parrot Room, we shouldn't give it away for free. People should have to go to patreon.com/Parrot Room.
It's old premium content that's long past its sell-by date.
That's right. That is one way to handle premium content, yes.
So, on Georgia, it seems to me that this Biden attempt to paint it as the new Jim Crow, and even without that, just to paint it as some sort of horrible repressive vote suppression law, despite being boosted by the usual suspects, including NPR, is sort of failing. Because if you look at the
beg to differ.
Really? Okay, good.
Well, I think I just read a headline said you may consider this not succeeding, but evidence that hasn't died is apparently Major League Baseball is pulling the All-Star game, which I assume was going to be in Atlanta. I can check.
No, that's a huge. I know Biden asked them to do that, and he said he thought it would be a good idea, and that seemed like complete overreach. I mean, they actually are complying.
Baseball pulls All-Star game from Georgia in response to voting law. That's the New York Times headline, so I guess that's what it means. And you know, I don't totally. And by the way, to give Biden full credit to all of his literary flourish, I think what he said is, "This makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle." Was that the line?
Correct.
Ooh, shouldn't whoever the speechwriter came up with that be executed or something?
It's the axis of eagle. It's the same speechwriter. David Frum secretly sabotaged
You think David Frum has snuck into the Biden? Look, he's
sabotaging.
I'll tell you, he's positioned himself on Twitter such that, for all we know, he's Biden's chief of staff.
Anyway, go ahead. You were praising Biden.
I don't totally get the logic of the many corporations that tend to do things like this. In other words, there's tension between kind of Trump land and woke land, and they go with woke land, whereas if I were a CEO, my instinct would be to just try to avoid going in either direction, because all of them are potential. There are a ton of baseball fans who are in Trump land, right?
Right.
I mean,
this will be a really interesting case, because there's sort of two types of corporations that become woke. One is the people like Nike who realize it's a marketing opportunity. There's money to be made. If we sell sneakers to all the woke people, they have a lot of money, and the deplorables really don't have any money at all, so let's go with the woke. The Delta CEO who denounced the bill after it turned out helping negotiate it, and the worst provisions from his point of view were taken out. So it doesn't ban, no excuse absentee ballots, for example. He faced a ton of pressure from MSNBC types. We shouldn't fly Delta, blah, blah, blah. And so he was just sort of reacting to pressure and caving, and then he faced the pressure from the other way, and he caved the other way. He just seems to be a noodle. Major League Baseball is weird.
Well, remember, they have a lot of... I mean, of course, baseball doesn't have nearly as many minority players as, basketball or football, but... And I think they have fewer than they used to. I think baseball is kind of...
Yes, I agree. And
fewer blacks, at least. A lot of Latinos.
Yeah.
So I don't know exactly what the logic is. I mean, I think if I were just thinking corporate strategy, I would try hard to stick with a principled line that we do not get into politics, and then you could claim that every time, and people might start taking it for granted and leaving you alone, but who knows?
The force arrayed against that is rising income inequality, with people at having the most money being liberals. So if you're a corporation that wants to make money, you're going to market to the people who have the most money, which are the liberals.
That's a good point. I mean, in terms of who shows up these days at baseball games, you get a much more of an upscale crowd than you did when I was a kid, I think.
Do the deplorables even follow baseball anymore? I mean, the society may have broken down so much that even baseball is sort of you think
baseball
is now a universal phenomenon.
Is now only kind of retro chic, and
it's only George Will and his subscribers. Yeah. No, it's not. But it's. You get the sense that things are really fucked up in terms of that's Charles Murray's book. The bottom quarter of whites just is not doing the things that the bottom quarter of whites used to do, like really caring about who won the World Series.
That's not an example he uses, is it?
No.
What kinds of examples does he use?
Oh, he just runs through a bunch of stats on divorce, marriage, drug use. It's pretty convincing.
I don't know. I mean, there was, a reaction against the NFL over Kaepernick, especially once Trump made it a big issue. I think there were, a non-trivial number of people who just, by way of protest, quit watching the NFL. But it's all kind of a shame because sports used to be one of the unifying things in America. You could talk sports to anybody, and now it's becoming more. I mean, there's always been class differences. NASCAR was never an elite pastime, watching NASCAR, but I think it probably is somewhat more fragmented than it used to be. I don't know.
Oh yeah, I'm becoming a UCLA fan unless they've already lost.
Are they still in the?
They were still in last time I checked.
I actually watched a little of the game in which I guess they beat Alabama last weekend, which was
an amazing one, I think.
An amazing 3-point shot on Alabama's side to bring it into overtime. But after that, Alabama got blown away. Yeah, I always get nostalgic when I see the baby blue and gold of UCLA because they were the dynasty when I was young. But we digress.
3 members of my family went to UCLA.
Is that right?
My parents met at UCLA.
Is that right?
Correct.
So they went to a public school. So they were not pampered as you are.
Were they pampered? It's a complicated question.
Parrot Room.
Okay.
Pay for the answer, folks.
So okay. Well, I don't know. I think it's I'm a paranoid. I think they were ginning up this thing against Georgia so they could use it to eliminate the filibuster. And once they've eliminated the filibuster, they're going to ram through immigration amnesty. Okay, so it was really all about immigration. I tend to think.
How does this work? The Georgia thing was somehow going to inspire Manchin to go along with ending the filibuster, or what? What?
The Georgia thing was supposed to inspire H.R. 1, which is the Democrats' big infrastructure-like grab bag of everything they want about elections. And it was supposed to inspire Manchin to agree to eliminate the filibuster for it. Now, the complication in my theory is that Clyburn has proposed eliminating the filibuster just for voting rights issues, okay? But so it wouldn't be eliminating the filibuster for everything necessarily. But once the dominoes start falling, you've eliminated them for judges, you eliminated them for voting rights issues, then you say, oh, but immigration rights are just as important as voting rights, so,
Well, also, the Republican retaliation, when they have power, is sure to come if the Democrats do a single domino, leaving aside what the Democrats do.
Right, but the Republicans don't want to, they want the domino on voting rights to stay up.
Yeah.
So they're not going to get rid of that one. So that was the plan. The plan was always, long before Biden was the nominee, the idea was we use H.R. 1 to get rid of the filibuster. That was the Democratic plan. And it's still the Democratic plan. I'm just not sure that it's going to fly. I would say, what do I know? It seems to me the infrastructure bills have a much greater chance of passage.
I mean, could this be part of your answer for why they broke them up? To have a good, uncontroversial bill, at least within the Democratic Party, that, that Republican. Of course, no, that's subject to reconciliation, so that can't be the filibuster.
It could be that you move from success to success. In other words, they have this COVID bill that they just passed, which was done on reconciliation, but it's quite popular, so it has the Republicans on the defensive. Then if you pass another bill that's quite popular through reconciliation, A, it makes Biden look like a winner, momentum, and B, it gives reconciliation a good name. So then maybe you can, pass other things on reconciliation. But I guess that's it's a Rahm Emanuel-like thing. Start with the little successes and build to the bigger successes. If you can only do one reconciliation bill a year, though, it doesn't seem one more. It doesn't seem to make sense to me.
Okay.
What do I know?
Final infrastructure question. If the first part of the infrastructure bill has a lot of, like Green New Deal type stuff, is none of that going to stick in Manchin's throat? Or are they just going to like make up for it by giving like vacation cruises to coal miners or something?
That's a very good question. It does have it, and I assume some of it does. But Manchin, like I said before, he's transactional. He'll cut some sort of deal. The question is how many people. If Manchin's all that's standing in the way, there's not much standing in the way. The question is how many other Democrats on these issues are letting Manchin take the lead, but they like eliminating the filibuster. They secretly don't want to get rid of it either. So if Manchin caves, they will have to step forward and say what they think. If Sinema and Tester are still against the filibuster, they might not get rid of the filibuster. If Manchin's the only person against the filibuster, I think they will get rid of the filibuster.
Okay.
That's.
What else is going on in the world?
So
George
Ukraine
Floyd
is about
trial.
to be
What's that?
Ukraine is about to be invaded.
Is it?
Russian troops are massing on the border. And it turns out Biden hasn't talked to Zelensky like forever. So despite the fact that the Democrats made such a big deal of defending Ukraine during the impeachment hearings, it's not clear they're going to do anything.
Or maybe Biden should announce that Putin's not a killer and see if that appeases him.
You wouldn't defend Ukraine. Are you going to defend Ukraine?
You mean personally? Like, would I send American troops to defend Ukraine?
Or even make a military threat?
I don't think so. Ukraine's not in NATO. I think
right. We've
expanded NATO to a point where honoring those treaty obligations is a non-trivial commitment in itself. I would certainly work hard to. I would favor. I'm not a big fan of sanctions, but I would favor punishment of Russia along that dimension if they invaded. Humiliating
Biden by taking over Ukraine after he's made a big deal of opposing Putin's influence in Ukraine, when it wasn't taken over under Trump, but it will be taken over under Biden, would be the sort of irony that Putin would appreciate. No?
Oh, totally. It's like
his idea of a joke.
Yeah, no, it's like when he was it that he sent, the whole Georgia thing. Do you remember that dust up? There was it was a breakaway part of Georgia that Russia was supporting or something. I forget the name. But anyway, finally, Putin sent soldiers in somewhere who, took a bunch of, NATO or American-provided hardware, American weapon systems, and proudly brought them back to Russia. And I know he loved that. Never call a killer, I guess, is the moral of the story. I don't know.
You wanted to talk about topic A.
What, the George Floyd thing?
Yeah.
I don't have that much to say. I haven't paid that much attention. I heard a little testimony on a Washington Post podcast. It seems like in some ways, the defense lawyers are going to have a tough row to hoe, but you never know. It's just that I didn't quite realize how many people there were who kind of were urging the cops to change course. And, there was this martial arts expert who says he knew that the way the knee placement on the neck was bad, and he's screaming at him. And then there was the EMT woman who, she said she tried to get through and take his pulse. The cops wouldn't let her in. And so there is that kind of array of testimony.
The coroner's, is it the coroner? The medical autopsy showed basically no damage resulting from the knee on the neck and huge quantities of drugs in the guy's system. So
yeah, but it's not hard to imagine that, yes, without the drugs he wouldn't have died, but with the drugs and without the knee on the neck he wouldn't have died. You know, I mean, it had to impede his cardiovascular and respiratory systems to some extent. I mean,
it can't have helped. It can't have helped. But if the guy's, it has to be beyond a reasonable doubt, remember. And
well, the way the indictment is stated is something like that the knee contributed substantially to the death, or there's something careful about the way they worded it that on the one hand warrants the charges, but on the other hand doesn't require them to show that that the drugs didn't play a role or something.
I guess that's right, but can the defense show beyond a reasonable doubt that he would have died from his fentanyl dose, which was it was on some scale it was 11, according to the Ann Coulter's latest column, and it's been deemed
sure
to
that
be
wasn't
fatal.
just a Spinal Tap reference on her part?
She tried to make it a Spinal Tap reference.
I don't doubt it.
When it's been fatal in doses as low as 3, so it just seems there's a reason. A fair jury might find a reasonable doubt, certainly to the murder charge. This, if ever there was a biased jury, I mean, you would have to be incredibly courageous on this jury to not convict.
I don't know. I know nothing about the composition of the jury. What is the composition of the jury?
I don't care. What
it matters.
Does the race
it
make?
matters. I mean, Wait, what happened in the Rodney? They let the cops off in the Rodney King case, right? It can happen.
Right. That was the first case that proved you shouldn't
do that. Okay, but the point is the trial was in Simi Valley, wasn't it? Which is a cop stronghold or something. Anyway, there
were 2 trials, so it's but that made the first may have been in
but
Simi
look,
Valley.
it can happen. The dynamics of juries. I was on a jury one time, and it's a fascinating subject in its own right. But
no. Normally that's true, but in the O.J. Simpson case, it'd be another case. But I think this is beyond that.
The O.J. Simpson case was.
You have to assume a false identity and move, and if you're black, you have to assume a false identity and move if you don't convict.
But the O.J. Simpson
not going to convict.
The O.J. Simpson case is kind of the opposite of Rodney King, right? Rodney King, they let the white cops off. O.J. Simpson, they let the black.
Right. Okay, so it was even easier in the O.J. Simpson case. But at the time, it was thought they could never let this obvious murderer off. It was a shock to white people when they let him off.
Well, Detective Van Adder did bring the blood, O.J. Simpson's blood, to the crime scene rather than book it at the police station as he should have. Just saying. Although, as I think I told you in the Parrot Room at one point, I've now heard what the explanation for that kind of behavior is.
He just wanted to be where the action was.
It takes time to book evidence, and he wanted to hurry and get to where the media was, which was at the scene of the crime.
That's always my philosophy.
Me too. Ever since I learned why he did it.
Forget the evidence, go to where the media is.
So I don't know. I don't know. It's I mean, if he doesn't get convicted of manslaughter, I think it's going to be it could be a long hot summer, as they say. But just as a practical matter, it may be that even that isn't enough to totally quell protest.
I think that's probably true, but. How does a guy like that survive in prison?
I don't know.
I guess they have to show him special consideration.
Well, you would think that the system is more inclined to give a guy like that a break than they might be to give other people a break.
No, I just think they try to prevent people from being murdered in prison. So if you're likely to be murdered, you go into solitary confinement.
Maybe. I honestly don't know. I mean, I'm sure it varies from prison system to prison.
I know that in Britain, they, there were three special solitary confinement cells in one prison, and one of them had Julian Assange and Tommy Robinson, and I don't know who was in the third, Barabbas. But
Give us Barabbas. Wait, don't you have a family connection to the movie The Robe?
Yes, I do. Why?
Well, isn't Barabbas? Doesn't he figure in The Robe? Don't
Probably.
they say, "Give us Barabbas"?
Oh, really? Oh, maybe
Isn't
my
Barabbas,
grandmother.
Isn't he the guy that they had the choice of releasing either Jesus or Barabbas, and they released Barabbas?
But the robe is about a pope, isn't it?
I thought the robe was about Jesus' robe. You don't know your own family's legacy, Mickey?
No,
this is pathetic.
I don't know.
I'm going to go. Okay, let's save this for the Parrot Room. I'm going to find out if you're right, and if you're wrong, I'm going to subject you to ritual humiliation.
What the other thing about the robe, of course, is it was featured a young Harry Shearer.
Sneak preview,
That's
Mickey.
a 12-year-old.
Sneak preview. You're wrong, but I'm going to save the ritual humiliation for the Parrot Room.
My grandmother was writing about the Bible? Jesus.
So to speak.
What was the other thing we were going to look up?
Well, I have already sent you the link to the car. That's another. I mean, we got some serious bonus content coming up in the Parrot Room, folks. So you're going to look at that picture of the car and tell us, with no further research, whether the guy at the Capitol, who's no doubt been arrested, is a Trump supporter or some other.
Cars are a pretty good sociological marker. You know, I mean, I think that was Karl Rove's first insight. Was one. I mean, it's one of his big insights in one of the big elections he won was basically targeting voters on the basis of their cars. So if you had a Saab, forget it. You're not hearing anything from Karl Rove. So
this does
I
not look
that.
classically like obviously Trump. It's not a pickup truck. But I can't tell if it's American made, which is certainly relevant. That would figure in your analysis, right?
I think so. Yes. Also, yes. Anyway, I'll render my verdict in the Parrot Room.
Plus, yeah, go ahead.
I'm completely going at 0.75 speed here, so you should really listen to this on 1.5 speed.
They should always listen to us on 1.5 speed. We're old. That reminds me.
I'm turning into Joe Biden.
I had an age-related dream I'll talk about in the Parrot Room. We got a lot of content coming up, folks.
I mean, is this Biden act from me working for you? Am I humanizing myself? Do I seem less of a motor mouth?
It would help if you could fall down some airplane stairs or something, but you're getting there.
Okay, good. That can easily be done. Would require me to go on an airplane, though. So.
Just try to sprint up the stairs the way he did.
Okay, well, that could produce the same result.
So, you know what else I want to talk about in the Parrot Room?
I don't.
Let's see. Well, the New York Times did this piece on, the head of Zappos who died under strange circumstances. Tony, it's Hsieh. I don't know how you spell it.
Right.
I mean, pronounce
I know of him.
Yeah, no, I have.
Jules tried to save him.
Jules did try to save him. The Times did a big, kind of almost TikTok about his demise. They got into the drugs, including nitrous oxide. As it happens, I did some research into nitrous oxide as an undergraduate, and I want to talk about this. I think the Times seriously actually missed the story and painted an unduly unflattering picture of him.
Hard to believe they're not going to turn that into a book.
Or a movie. Now we could talk. Oh, some people who G. Gordon Liddy died. We should talk about him.
I guess, but I should have things to say about him, but it's not.
Yeah, I don't have much to say about him. I got to admit. But today is Marvin Gaye's birthday. We could talk about him. I think we should talk about him. And we've talked about Matt Gaetz. We didn't talk about COVID at all. Just quickly, as was kind of evident, the death rate now has clearly quit descending and is plateauing. Cases continue to plateau and not decline further, I think, at last check, and more or less. And maybe even rise a little. And it's a fight between I was just ridiculed last night for pronouncing it vaccine. This is a legacy of my Texas upbringing, whereas you would say vaccine. Anyway, race between the vaccine and this New York variant, which is not the British variant. It's more like the South African variant.
There was a really scary statistic out of Britain, which is of the people who are hospitalized and released. Okay, they say you've beaten COVID, you're released. 1 in 8 die.
One
in 3 have to go back to the hospital later, and 1 in 8 die of various related elements.
Now, is this a worse number that's associated with a particular variant, a worse number than average?
No, it's just that general COVID is no good for you, even if you think you've survived. It does long-term damage. And if you have. The guy was very vague on exactly how it killed the 1 in 8. So the interviewer had it's a BBC interview. The interviewer had your question, and the guy did not answer it. I assume that if you have heart problems, it makes your heart problems worse. If you have diabetes, it makes your diabetes worse. But it's nothing you want, even, and that just shows that even if you survive, it's just nothing you want.
It's definitely nothing you want. I do think that the vaccination rate is going to start winning out within a couple of weeks. I've
been doing crazy things.
What's the craziest thing you've done?
I used a public restroom.
Ooh, edgy.
It's ridiculous. I shouldn't have done
it. It's not so much about surface transmission. Was it loaded with people? Were there people?
No, there weren't people on it. But the problem with restrooms is not surface transmission, Bob.
Oh, what is it?
The air filled with fetid contaminants.
Yeah, but many of those are unrelated to COVID, right?
They're obviously a major source of transmission to COVID. Why do you think masks aren't effective?
We can talk about this in the Parrot Room. Obviously, you know more than I do.
No, I don't. It's just speculation. But
we can also talk about golfer Justin Thomas.
They say that one of the main problems redesigning skyscrapers and office buildings to be COVID compliant or COVID unfriendly is the bathrooms. There's no way to design them that makes them safe. Go ahead.
I was just trying to wind it down since we've been speaking for an hour and 7 minutes, and I'm trying to
give the false impression that you're forcing me to wind it down.
You always do
even
that,
though I'm completely out of gas.
And you also make me do all the Parrot Room promotion, like as if all of the money went to me, which is not the case.
I'm not big on promotion.
You're not big on promotion. I mean, I come from we can talk about this in the Parrot. Yeah, let's talk about. Oh yeah, we were going to talk about how pampered you were.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And like the fact that I come from a culture that is totally averse, a cultural background totally averse to self-promotion, and yet I do it for the good of the team, and you don't come from a culture so averse to self-promotion, and yet you burden me with the entire task. Not that I'm complaining.
My culture is pretty averse to self-promotion.
Yeah, you just said that they're like Hollywood based. Like they brought us the movie The Robe, which your knowledge of is not what we might have hoped.
My grandmother was one of 8 writers on the movie The Robe, and I guess she was a best-selling novelist.
Well, you don't get to be a best-selling novelist without knowing how to promote yourself.
Possibly.
Right? Actually, you did used to be able to do that. Now you can't. That's another thing we can talk about.
And this was in Austria. She wasn't best-selling in America.
Oh, well, anybody can be a bestseller in Austria, Mickey.
Anyway, she could write dialogue, which is apparently a talent.
So they say. Also, I've been listening to the Guns of August about the origins of World War I. Speaking of Austria, maybe we'll talk about that. Anyway, we've got. I mean, they're just they're salivating. They're salivating at this point. We needn't say more. Except that you go to patreon.com/Parrot Room to gain access to the Parrot Room, to become a Patreon and a Parrot Head.
For a caffeineless,
I tell you, if you really didn't
claiming this has the Barnes quality,
if you really didn't have caffeine, I applaud You got through on sheer willpower. This is impressive. Are you going to be able to get caffeine before the Parrot Room?
Maybe not. This could be a first. They should tune in to actually see me zonk out.
That's another thing.
In the middle of the Parrot Room.
That's another thing.
I'll be nailed to the perch.
Will Mickey be motionless during the Parrot Room? All the more money, all the more reason to send your money to the Parrot Room. Okay.
Okay.
Is that? Do you have the parrot with you? I mean, we don't want to give it all away for free, but this is the parrot, folks.
I am the parrot.
See? Who could resist? Okay, Mickey. We'll see you there.
Okay. Take care.
Thanks.